Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest today is the great drummer Jaime Oldaker, who's played with Eric Clapton, Bob Seger, Vince Gill, and many, many more. But first, let's talk about some news from last week that's kind of interesting. The first thing is MySpace was purchased by Time Incorporated. Yes, MySpace, that once great music platform, has really fallen to new lows. So let's look back a little bit. When MySpace was at its peak, it was purchased by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp for about $580 million, which at the time was a huge amount. Everybody was saying, you're never going to get your money out of it. And you know what? They were right, because right after that, boy, the platform started to really sink. And so much so that in 2011, a company called Viant, along with Justin Timberlake, purchased the company for only $35 million. So it went from being kind of a top shelf when it comes to music platforms to being not even an also-ran when it comes to social platforms for your music. Well, a couple other things happened along the way. MySpace is a perfect example of one of the things that I always caution people about, and that's not to put all of your eggs in one social media platform basket. So in other words, it's always better to have your own website, because at least you can control it. If you rely on MySpace, or if you rely on YouTube alone, or Facebook, or Twitter, or Instagram, or whatever is your main place to have your fans see what you're doing, you're in for a surprise, because sooner or later, that platform fades. Twitter is one that's happening today. Twitter was actually very, very hot, and now it's not. And people are wondering what its future is going to be. Anyway, one of the things that happened with MySpace is after Justin Timberlake and Viant purchased it in 2011, they decided that they were going to give it a makeover. So in 2013, this makeover, MySpace 2.0, gets launched. And the minute it gets launched, everybody loses their followers, even Justin Timberlake. So you wake up one morning and find that you have 0 followers, and you have to start from scratch again. And that's one of the problems with relying on a social network as the main place that people can find you. So now we're back to MySpace falling from last year at this time about 50 million visitors, which is pretty good. By the end of the year, it was down to about 17 million per month, which, boy, that's not much at all considering. So as a result, Viant, and Viant basically owns a lot of other platforms besides MySpace. MySpace is just a small player in this whole thing. Viant relies on advertising. They like to call themselves an advertising cloud. So that's why Viant is attractive to Time Incorporated. It has nothing to do with MySpace. MySpace, they can pretty much care less about, which is going to be interesting as we go forward to see what happens if it actually does sink, or if they try to put some more money into it and see if it can rise again. So watch out for that, because it's a really interesting development. And it just goes to show you that, once again, don't rely on social media, on social networks as your main point of presence online. You have to have a website, because at least you control it. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. I just launched a new mini coaching program, and it's called Lead and Background Vocal Mixing Tricks, as well as a live mixing workshop where I personally help you with your mixes. Go to BobbyOwsinskiCourses.com to learn more. The next thing is, I was reading a very interesting post on the Daily Beast last week, and it was comparing RCA, the old RCA, to Apple. And basically the gist of the post was that RCA was Apple before Apple ever happened. It was the Apple of its day. And there are so many similarities, it's eerie. First of all, David Sarnoff, who was the founder and CEO of RCA, was basically the Steve Jobs of the day. He was the visionary. He was the guy that basically made it all go. So what did they do? Well, first of all, they were kind of the first in wireless technology, and we're talking back in the 20s now. They were the first to really get a working television, a commercial television going. At the time, they were the first to actually offer turntables to the public. So even going back to in the 20s there, they were kind of on the forefront. And they were also the world's largest seller of music when they bought the Victor Talking Machines Company in 1929. So if you just do the parallel there, there's quite a lot, because Apple, of course, was the largest seller of music for quite a while now. So you can see that similarity there. The other thing that was interesting was RCA, of course, was a major record label, and they had artists like Louis Armstrong and Gershwin and Caruso and Rachmaninoff, Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, Toscanini, Jimmy Rogers, Elvis even, and later David Bowie. So they had a large roster of really fantastic artists. Another thing that RCA was noted for was their R&D. So for instance, RCA was the first company to make ribbon microphones. They're the first company to sell tube amplifiers. So they were the first amplifier company, basically. They're the first company to come out with the 45 RPM record for singles. They're the first company to bring out the stereo record. They were the first company to commercialize color television. They owned NBC, the television network. And they also owned Technicolor in film. So you can see they're an innovator. They really had a lot of things going, as Apple does today. They also had a couple of clunkers in there. They're, of course, a big proponent of the 8-track cassette, which came and went in a flash, and also quad sound. So this was quad on a piece of vinyl, which, again, came and went. So they didn't actually get it right all the time, but they got it right most of the time. And that's kind of the same thing with Apple as well. In 1970, David Sarnoff retired, and that was the beginning of the end for RCA, because after that, they diversified into food and into real estate, and things started to go downhill fast. And eventually, they were acquired by GE. So we don't know if that's going to happen to Apple yet, because the transition really just occurred 4 years ago between Steve Jobs passing away and Tim Cook taking over. So we don't know how that's actually going to affect things in the long run. The one thing we can see is Apple doesn't seem to be as innovative as they were, but it's a little too early to tell. But the similarities between RCA in the mid-20th century and Apple in the late 20th century and early 21st century is pretty amazing. My guest today is Jaime Oldaker, who is the longtime drummer for Eric Clapton and Bob Seger, and has also played with superstars like the Bee Gees, Peter Frampton, Vince Gill, Leon Russell, and many, many more. I spoke with Jaime from his home in Tulsa, Oklahoma via Skype, where he had some of the best stories that I've heard in a long time. Once again, thank you for being with me. I've listened to your work a lot through the years, and sometimes not even knowing it was you until I kind of went back and looked and realized who you've played with.
My career I found quite humorous. So.
In what way?
Well, I mean, just working with the people I worked with, I find everything quite funny in the entertainment business.
Got it.
Actually, if I step back and look at it, all the artists I work with are, I find artists quite funny. I chose to be play behind them and not be one of them. So.
Yeah, got it. Tulsa seems to have such a great music scene, and so many great musicians have come from there. What's the secret? What happened?
Well, I don't know what that is. I mean, people, you hear that a lot, especially here in Tulsa. I mean, it's always gone on, the Tulsa sound. I mean, I don't know what that is really, other than the fact that, I can only speak for the time when I started in the Tulsa scene, which would have been the late 60s, up through there at Clapton, Leon Russell, J.J. Cale days. What happened before that, I don't know, So, that phrase was kind of, thought up by someone else besides any of us musicians. Someone in town said, "Oh, let's call it the Tulsa Sound." Yeah. So, was it a big thing? Probably not quite as impacted as Motown and New Orleans and the Stax stuff and all that kind of stuff like that. But it does have a little bit of a niche in the fact that you can speak to a lot of people that are musicians or entertainment people. You'll say, "Oh, I'm from Tulsa," and they say, "Oh, you're from that place that had that cool music." They don't really know exactly what it was, but they've always heard about something that came out of Tulsa. My good friend of mine, Vince Gill, he's from down in Oklahoma City, which is about 90 miles from Tulsa. And he told me one time a few years back, he said, I grew up outside Oklahoma City as a kid, and we used to hear about some stuff there was this stuff going on in Tulsa. We never took the time to drive 90 miles to see what it was, but we always heard about something that was going on there. Now, my take on it is, the influence is we had a lot of great teachers, had a lot of great influence between the Black Afro-American community here, Hispanic, and also Native American, influence of Oklahoma. I think a lot of it has to do with listening to the right records. Growing up, when I grew up here in Tulsa, we had to play, most every type of genre of music we could find. So we kind of learned that stuff from rock to country to blues to jazz, and we would not really copy that. We didn't compromise much. Eric Clapton made a quote about Tulsa music. He said, the Tulsa musicians will not compromise with their music. They play it the way they hear it. So we kind of took those songs that were popular in those days, playing around town, and we would kind of make them into our own, the way we thought they should be, whether it be a combination of a little bit of blues, a little bit of country, a little bit of, Native American stuff, a little bit of jazz, it was a little bit of influence in each thing. That's my way I dealt with it. Other people have different, statements about what they think that was.
But you see, that's what's so different. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I was playing in club bands as well, doing basically the same thing. And for us, it was just the opposite. Instead of trying to do our own thing with the top 40 songs that we happen to be playing, sure, it was trying to get as close as possible to it.
To the real thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. We never, and I'm speaking for myself only, I never found myself copying anything. I would take influences from different things. I have a vast amount of music here that I have listened to over the years from all over the world. And I preach this to anybody, to young musicians, just be aware of all these types of music. Don't copy them, but take a little bit from each one. None of us are original. We all stole it from somebody else.
Yeah, right.
And they'll tell you that, and it's just take pieces of that, and that's how you become your own player. Just taking a bit from each little genre of music that you like, and then that turns into your own way of playing. That's how I did it, to become my own player and not say, oh, that's, you're copying so-and-so or another drummer. Because there's my take was always, why would I want to copy that guy? There's already that guy,
Yeah.
There's already one of those guys already. And same in bands. There's already that band. Influences, yes. Just take some of that and become your own thing.
Right.
That's how I dealt with it.
Tell me about Phil Driscoll. That was your big break, right?
Well, that was one of them. I played around Tulsa a lot as a kid, and Phil Driscoll was from around here in Tulsa, and he had a kind of a nightclub, show band kind of deal, at the Chase Park Plaza Hotel in St. Louis, which was a big hotel owned by Harold Koppler, which is KPLR radio and TV. And we played in a place called The Basement. So in the summertime, we were going to school, Dick Sims and I, we would spend our summers up there playing at the Chase Park Plaza at The Basement. It was a show thing. And Phil was a tremendous musician, still is, And so that was kind of something where I kind of got on the road, away from home for a while. I was still living at home. There was a conga player named Sergio Pastor that was played with us as well. And I'd kind of done that was in the, I guess, 71, 70, around there. That's also when I went up with Bob Seger during the same time and did the album back in 72.
Was Seger before Clapton for you?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I did two things. I did the Silver Bullet tour when I was with Eric, and I also did the Back in 72 record with Bob on Capitol Records. That had the original studio version of Turn the Page on it. Mm-hmm. And I think that album, I don't know, Capitol didn't put it back out. I don't know what happened, but it's hard to find, actually in print. But we spent, there was a band here from Tulsa called Teagarden and Van Winkle, which is David Teagarden.
Oh, sure.
And they had a song out called rock and roll or something.
Yeah.
God loves rock and roll.
Yeah.
And they've been Seeger's backup band for a while Dickie and I were still here working with Phil. So when Teagard and Skip went on their own, Jim Byfield, myself, and Dickie went to Detroit to play some shows as a trio. And that's kind of when we first met Marcy Levy, was up in Detroit at Oak Park. And we came back, and Byfield decided not to go back and stay here in Tulsa. And Dickie and I decided to stay with Bob's band. And that was Drew. It was part of the Silver Bullet band, and myself and Dick Sims. And that also, I brought a guy named Alto Reed into the band.
Oh, sure.
I told Bob, I said, let's get a sax player. I grew up playing jazz. He goes, no, we don't need a sax player in a rock and roll band from Detroit, because at that time you had MC5 and Brownsville Station.
Yeah, it was a lot harder. Yeah.
Yeah, those were all the big, Mitch Ryder and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Big MC5, and that was all the stuff going on in Detroit at that time in the rock business. And so Bob said, no way. So I kind of, talked to him enough to he let, Alto at least come by and audition, and we ended up hiring him, because I said, so we'd seen this guy and heard about this other guy in New Jersey that had the same configuration type band, which was Springsteen.
Yeah.
And he had a sax player too. So he's got a sax player, but we've seen him play before. I said, he's got one. So if you look at Springsteen's band and Seeger's band, that configuration back in those days, they're identical.
Now that you mention it, you're right. Yes.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
And that was because that was kind of the influence, So I went with Bob, and we did the Back in 72 record. That's when I came back to Tulsa after that. And that's when I started working for Leon. And that's when Leon set up Shelter Records here in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And Cale and all that stuff. All the Shelter Records LA bunch moved to Tulsa, and he bought the church studio. And from then I just decided to stay in the business.
Well,
things were rolling. They were going the right direction.
What was the connection with Eric then?
Eric's connection was through Carl Radel. Carl was from Tulsa, and I miss him dearly. And he used to come back and forth from LA to his house in Claremore he had built. And, he was in Derek and the Dominoes as well, and Delaney and Bonnie, which Eric was also part of those entities. And so the connection was already there. Leon produced Eric's first solo record. So Eric had already kind of been in this camp, George Harrison. They were all kind of, I was younger then. So, I was the youngest one of the whole Tulsa bunch to be led into these guys that were at least 9 to 10 years my elder, and I was petrified of these people,
Yeah.
But they let me in there. So Carl used to come out and see us perform at a place called the Observatory Club. That's when Marcy Levy had come back down from Detroit, and she she lived in Tulsa because Shelter was here, and all that kind of just started gelling together with the Shelter studio with Leon. I was working there. They were making records in there, mainly goofing around more than making records because we were kids. We didn't know what to do with that studio. Leon gave us the studio, and we just had parties and got drunk. Chase girls around, because we could get in. And Tulsa at that time, and Leon Russell his career was going quite well, in the early 70s, and everybody, knew Leon. If you were a musician in Tulsa and had long hair, they knew you were involved probably with Leon's bunch.
Yeah.
If you were English, there was a lot of English people there, South Africans, Jenny Cordell, and all that bunch. So we kind of ran the town in a way. The city was like, wow, cool. So it was hard to get into the Shelter studio. So if you knew somebody, it was something to get into. Because I always wanted to get in there until I actually got hired by Leon. He used to come around and watch me play, and then he'd leave. And so Carl, anyway, used to come out and sit in with us at the place called the Observatory Club. It was out South Sheridan here in Tulsa. And Dickie, Byfield, myself, Larry Bell, and Marcy had a little band. And he came out one night, he sat in, and he asked me, he said, can you give me a cassette tape of you, Dickie, and Marcy playing with Phil Driscoll and Seeger and around Tulsa, just some, a compilation of some stuff. I said, yeah. He said, gotta go back to LA. So I said, okay. So I got him a cassette tape, I got it to him here, and he left. And in the meantime, I was working at Shelter, and I became a part of a band called the Gap Band.
Yeah.
Which was had a big song called "Drop the Bomb on."
Yes, that's right.
And that was the three Wilson brothers that were from here in Tulsa, at Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, those are the three streets that intersect in the Greenwood area of Tulsa, which was burnt down during the race riots. And it's the three streets that intersect in Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. So that was the Gap Band. And we'd seen them on the north side, Leon and I and Denny Cordell. And that's when Leon signed them to Shelter Records, because they were just a fabulous band, unbelievable. And the three brothers. So I was working with them and making a record. And then Leon decides to get rid of the Shelter Band, which would have been, Chuck Blackwell and Carl Radel, the band he'd had for a long time, the Shelter People Band. And he had the Gap Band. That's his new backup band to go on tour. And I was a part of that band along with the Gap Band's drummer. We had two drummers, Roscoe Smith and myself. And so we're starting to rehearse. This was in into 73. So we're in the studio at Leon's house, rehearsing for the tour. So I had another gig. I played with Marcy, and Carl comes back in town from LA. And he comes and he sits down. He said, "I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay." And he said, "I need to talk to Dickie too." I said, "Okay." And I sat down with him. He goes, "Listen, you gave me that tape a year ago, that cassette." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I sent it to a friend of mine, Eric Clapton." And I didn't know who Eric Clapton was, to tell you the truth, other than Cream.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew he was, somebody. I don't know. I was too focused on being a rock star and worrying about who other rock stars were.
Yeah.
So I was trying to get up on the big stage myself. So I thought, okay, I'm cool, And I mean, I'd heard of him, but I knew he was somebody, And he said, he called me a few days ago and said that you sent me that cassette tape. He said, "I've been sitting here for a year." And, he was getting off the heroin addiction at the time. And over in London at his place in Surrey, and said, "I've been sitting in front of the fireplace playing to these cassettes you sent me of these guys from Tulsa." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm getting ready to make another record soon in Miami." And he said, "I want you to bring those kids with you." And Carl said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." So I got to go on the road with Leon in 2 weeks, And he said, "Well," Dickie said, "Yeah, I'm in," because he didn't have anything going on. So, the fact that he'll bring those two kids with you, I thought, "Oh, okay." I don't know. And that was again criteria to record 461 Ocean Boulevard. So Carl looked at me. He goes, "Look, you need to decide. Let me know in a couple of days. I got to call Eric and tell him something." So okay, I got to do something here. So I didn't know what to do. I was only 20, and I was. I don't know, my loyalty. I mean, Leon's career was going quite well in late 70s. Late 73. He was pretty high up there on the charts and popularity charts. And I thought, okay. And I talked to my parents. They said, "Well, I don't know, what to do." And Carl did. When I left the club, Carl said, "Look," he said, "let me tell you something." He said, "I worked with Leon for a lot of years." And I said, "I know." He said, "Look," he said, "if you go with the Eric Clapton, with this organization, which was Stigwood, he said, you can take this quarter he had in his hand. He said, you can put it in a phone booth anywhere and dial this number right here, and a big black car will come pick you up." And I went, "Okay." And he said, "Also, if you stay with Leon, there's a good chance you'll be driving his bus in 5 years." That's a true story. And I went, "Okay." So I had a week and a half to think about that. So I went on. Obviously I made the right decision. So I talked to my parents. I said, "Well, I don't know. What do you do?" And so I thought, okay. Buddy Jones was a friend of mine here in Tulsa. He was a drummer, and he was also Leon's manager at the time. So I thought to myself, okay, I'll just go talk to him. He's Leon's manager.
Yeah.
So I went to Buddy and I said, I got this situation with Carl. And he said, "Oh, okay." He's just, Eric Clapton wants me to go. This guy, Eric Clapton, wants me to go make a record. And I said, you're Leon's manager, right? He said, "Yeah." So you can tell him, right? And I can just go on my way. And he said, No. You're going to have to go see him and tell him yourself. And I said, "No, come on, dude. You're like, that's what managers do. You're supposed to take care, and I go away, and I'll be gone. He said, no, you're going to have to go see him. So I was petrified.
Yeah.
And okay. So I made an appointment to go to the McClintock mansion here, which is the old McClintock oil mansion here in Tulsa, where he lived at the time. And I remember going over, that friend of mine took me over there and knocked on the door, and an English guy answered. I didn't know who it was. Somebody was staying at the house. He said, "Oh, come on in, Leon's upstairs." And so I went up there. I went to the second floor of the house. It was a very, very wonderful, wonderful home. It belonged to, back in the old Wade Phillips days, in the Phillips 66 oil boom days. It was a gorgeous old place. And the second floor was like a big kind of a long room, ballroom looking place, wood floor, and hardly any furniture in it. Great curved windows. But there was a throne chair he bought in England, like a king's throne, at the end of this room, and he was sitting in the chair with the top hat on and a pair of sunglasses and curling his beard like he does.
Oh, geez.
I'm going. I looked down, and it was like, it wasn't but about 20 foot probably down, or maybe not even that far, but it seemed like it was at least 10 miles down the hallway. I was looking at it, and I was like, I was shaking. My knees were shaking. So I finally made it up to him, and he was sitting there. And he said, well, as I told him what's going on, he goes, well, if anybody else besides Eric, I'd be upset, but you have my blessing. So I thought, okay, great, So, I got out of there much quicker than I got in. I ran out the door. So, God, okay, I'm out. So, but, the story goes, and then obviously I went to Miami with Dickie, and what happened. But funny thing is, I did a record back in 2005 called Mad Dogs and Okies, which is my record.
Yes, I want to talk to you about that, yeah. And,
the master, I owned the whole video and everything. And so when I was getting ready to make the record, I couldn't raise any money in Nashville. They said, well, why would Eric Clapton come and play on your record? I said, okay, never mind. You don't understand, So I thought, who are the two most famous people that I know in the country business and the rock business? I can just call on the phone. They're friends of mine. Vince Gill was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I knew. I said, okay, there's one. And Eric Clapton was the other one, to do this project, that I dreamed up. And so I called both of them. They both said, sure, we're in. Then I was like, oh, great. They said yes. I was figuring they said, nah, we don't want, bad idea. We don't have time. Something. They both said, yeah, cool, great idea. So I got to call them, different artists, Taj Mahal, and people were putting this Oklahoma thing kind of together with people who kind of had either some relationship or some, history with the state of Oklahoma where I'm from. And so I got around to calling Leon, and he was in Nashville, his house and studio there. He picked the phone up, and I said, hey, Leon, it's Jaime Oldaker. And he goes, yeah, man. And I said, listen, I'm doing this project, I'd like to be involved. And he said, yeah, I heard about that. I said, listen, I'm in the studio right now. Call me back in a little bit. So I said, okay, I'll call you back. So my hero growing up here in Tulsa, I call him back and call him back and call him back and call him back, and nothing, not an answer. So I emailed, no answer. So I finally call Chuck Blackwell, which was played with him and also with Taj, because I got Taj to do the thing because I got Gary Gilmore and Chuck to come up to play with Taj again, because they hadn't played with him or seen him since Montreux.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, oh, that'd be great. Or Monterey, one of the things they did back in the 60s. So Chuck said, I called Chuck. He said, well, let me call him. He's probably just, got a little starch in him or something. And I said, I'll talk to him. So I said, okay, cool. Thank you so much. He calls back a few days later and goes, well, I talked to him, but I don't think I got the answer you wanted. And I said, well, what happened? He said, I called Lee and I said, hey, man, we're going to go to Nashville to do this project Jamie's doing with Taj, and Gilmore's going and I'm going. And, we could get together and write some songs or something. He said, all he said was, I don't want nothing to do with that thing Jamie's doing. Hung up.
Oh.
And I went, what? So I thought to myself, I told Chuck, I said, well, listen, I didn't sleep with his wife, and I don't owe him any money. So I'm trying to figure out why I'm in such disfavor with him all of a sudden, So, I spent the next, I guess, 5-6 years trying to find out what the problem was. I sent him emails, and hey, you're my hero growing up here. You taught me a lot. I'm thankful for everything. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you. And I talked to Emily Smith, fat, sweet Emily, and she went and talked to him, and she said, well, hell, he don't tell me nothing. So I said to him, what would you have done? You were 20 years old, Leon. He said, I want to talk about it. So finally, I think it was 2010, maybe something like that, maybe 11. A friend of mine here, I grew up in Tulsa. His name's Dan Mayo, and his parents owned the Mayo Hotel here, and they were very influential in the arts and culture of the city of Tulsa with the ballet and everything. I grew up with him, and he was friends with Leon. So he told me, he said, look, Leon's coming to Kane's Ballroom. I was down in Texas. I think I was living in Texas. And he said, I'm going to go down to Kane's and, see if I can figure out what's going on here. I said, I don't know. So he went down there, went to the Kane's Ballroom. Leon was there on the bus, and he got on the bus, and he sat down with Leon and said, what's the deal with you and Jamie? And he said, Leon sat there with his white beard and twirled it around. And he said, let me make one thing perfectly clear here. Jamie deserted me.
Ah, yeah. Payback, huh?
That was it. And I went, that's it? At least I know. I said, I can't. And, I've done numerous shows on these past few years, some of these bluegrass shows. I did a show with Ray Wiley Hubbard on Willie's Picnic thing. Leon was on it. I tried to say hi to him, nothing. And Jim Keltner told me, he said, don't worry about it. I said, I asked for $200 raise on the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour, and he never spoken to him since. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
So,
the man holds
my Leon story. That's how I got in Eric Clapton's band. Pretty good story, I think.
Yeah, that's excellent. You played on so many great hits, especially with Eric. There's one I'm curious about. It's I Shot the Sheriff.
Yeah.
Which seemed out of Eric's wheelhouse there, but at least on paper, you'd think, okay, this doesn't work, and yet it worked perfectly when it was all said and done. How did that come about?
Came about from a guy named Joey Marcia, and George Terry's friend. That Joey Marcia was a guitar player with the Bee Gees.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bee Gees did most all their recording at Criteria
for
Atlantic and with RSO and Tom Dowd. And, they kind of ran that. Atlantic kind of leased that studio year round to have all their Atlantic acts in that studio, whether it be Aretha, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Joe Cocker, Eric, Joe Walsh, whoever. There was always someone in there that was connected to either the Atlantic group. It was Ahmet and Wexler, Arif, and Tom Dowd. So Tom Dowd was kind of a resident guy. So George Terry he worked as a session guy at Criteria. That's how he got into the Eric camp.
Oh, I see.
And because Tom Dowd worked there, and Tom said, hey, this guy's coming to record. You got to hang around a little bit, maybe get on this record. So George hung around and subsequently became part of the band by hanging out. So Joey Marcia went on vacation right before we started 461. Took his family down there, and he came back with an LP thing called Exodus, I think.
Ah, okay, right.
Which had a song called I Shot the Sheriff on it.
That's right, Marley.
He brought the record back from Jamaica, and he said, hey, he brought it to the studio, and he gave it to George, and George brought it in, and we sat down with Tom Dowd, and he said, look, he said, I just came back from Jamaica, and they're doing this stuff down there called reggae music. I don't know, it's really popular. And this guy here is like king. He's like the god of Jamaica. He's like the dude, We said, okay. So we put the record on, and reggae had never been heard of anywhere north of Miami Beach, period, before this. So we put it on, and we said, okay, we kind of like that song. I Shot Sheriff's kind of cool. So we went in and listened to it a couple times on the vinyl, and we just sat down as a band and just said, okay, well, how do we interpret that? And that we'll go back. I'll take that back to you now about you asking about Tulsa. That song was put together by a rhythm section of Tulsa guys, that decided, like I said earlier, let's don't copy the record. Let's just play it the way we think we would play it back in Tulsa. And that's how it came out.
It sounds it too. Yeah.
We just cut it and kind of jammed on it. So that feels pretty good. Let's do it. Let's do that song this way, you know. And that's what happened. I mean, Carl Rayl actually played two of the timbali breaks in that song. I didn't do them. You know, Carl he said, "Let me play timbales on something." I said, "Okay, we'll play on one break." You know, and so that's how we cut "I Shot the Sheriff." You know, and Eric didn't really particularly care for it so much because he didn't think we did it justice to Bob Marley's version. You know, but the record label obviously prevailed on that at the time and said, "No, this will be a big hit." You know, and before we knew it, it was up the charts and #1 in Cashbox, Record World, and Billboard, all three at the same time. You know.
Well, not only that, it introduced Marley to the
and it brought reggae and Bob Marley to the spotlight. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll tell anybody that argues with me or says anything about that from that time period of how Bob Marley got and reggae music got put an imprint on the country of the United States was because we cut that song.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it probably would have gotten here sometime, but I think that definitely helped the cause, of the awareness of people knowing what reggae music and who Bob Marley was in the United States, in North America, which is the biggest selling market in the world.
Well, I can tell you, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and we were the whitest band of white, and there was no influence, well, except for Philadelphia. There's the whole Philly soul, of course, but outside of that, no influence at all until I remember my band hearing that song and then trying to find out who this Bob Marley guy was. And the next thing you know, we're playing his records, we're playing his cassettes. So it definitely worked, at least, from my standpoint, from my small sphere of influence.
Sure. Well, I believe that. I mean, at my age now, I'm 65 now. I mean, I think I've been around in it long enough to go back in retrospect and look at, my thoughts and feelings now, 40 years later, about what went on back there and why I think it happened.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that, the song, we cut it and it did bring Bob Marley to the limelight. I think he probably realized that too. A bunch of white guys doing some reggae music.
Yeah, right. Well, let's go back to the Bee Gees for a second. What's the story about you playing on their drum loops?
Oh, that was interesting. That was a thing that a guy named Albie Gluten.
I don't know
if you know that name.
I do, yes, of course.
Well, he used to sweep the floors at Criteria before he became a producer and a player. He played, but he played on the 461 record. He did I think Mellotron or Clavo, something, one of those gizmos on Let It Grow. The song he played on that, but at the time he was working, like mailroom guy and sweeping the floors of Criteria.
I had no idea.
Hoping if somebody would, do something with him. Barefoot, wearing no shoes on all the time. Real bohemian type character, but a cool guy. So later, when he did the Streisand stuff and did the stuff with Barry Gibb, he called me up one time. This is, I don't know when it was, 80s, I guess, sometime. I forget the exact days. But that's when the Lindrum was introduced to the world that Roger Lynn came out with, which Roger used to work at Leon's here in Tulsa too, when he was designing the drum machine, pre-Lindrum. Because Cale, I'll tell you the story, Cale and Leon was sitting in the studio one night at Leon's house in the basement, and they used an old Rhythm Ace and a Kent drum machine. And I remember Leon sitting there and Roger Lynn was the engineer at the session. And Leon and Cale were sitting there together, and Cale looked over at Leon and said, "I wish somebody'd make a drum machine sound like drums."
The Genesis.
And I swear. And the light bulb went off in Roger Lynn's head. And that's where he started designing and making the Lindrum, was in Leon's basement.
Wow. And
it was all quarter-inch plug-in. Richard Feldman got involved later on. And it was just quarter-inch jack plug-ins first. Then someone said, "Hey, they got this thing called a chip over in Asia. You can store all this crap in this little chip." And they went, "Oh, cool." And that became the LM1.
Wow.
Later.
I had no idea.
Which we all hated. So anyway, so back to the Bee Gees. So the Bee Gees, this coincides with all this. The drum machine was out. People were making records with the LM1. So Barry Gibb, bless his heart, having they cooked up this idea with Albie Gluten of making this record called Spirits Having Flown, and the first thing was, let's find the best drummers in the United States that have the greatest time we know of, tempo-wise, time-wise. I mean, I don't know why they included me, but they did. So Albie, they all got together. So Picaro, me, I think Russ Kunkel, and Gad, I think, were the 4 guys, I think, as I remember. I know Russ was in. They were in at separate time, but Jeff was in. And so the idea was to have us create the drum tracks one beat at a time. So they were going to, the theory was, is Barry smoked pounds of grass. And he goes, well, I want to assemble a drum track so it's not a machine, but the time is perfect, but it's a real guy playing it. But it's going to be as perfect as a drum machine. They had a mechanical arm with a stick in it. They triggered and hit the drum. They were timing it. It was nuts, And so I said, okay, I guess, I don't know. They're paying a stupid kind of money. It was just stupid. Anybody would do it. He's got, well, of course I'll do this. And they put us up in these great hotels in down Miami Beach, blah, blah, blah. So we go in the studio, and the deal was that he had a thing called a Dr. Beat, a little rhythm box that they had back then. Just went kick, 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 and that's all it did. So he'd sit there, and so what we do is we go into the rhythm section, and we use the Bee Gees rhythm section guys and different drummers. So you go in, and we would learn the song we're going to record as a rhythm section, as you normally would to do a session. Okay, so I learned this one song. So okay, there's the song. We got the song. Okay, now forget that. Now we're gonna do the drum track, and we're gonna make a loop. Not just a loop. We're gonna make the whole drum track, start to finish. For this song we just learned. I said, okay, but it's gonna be the time is it's not moving anywhere. It's perfect.
Yeah.
What they would do, you would go in and you knew the song. So you'd start with the first measure of the song, which would either be the intro or I'll use the verse section, which would be a part we'd already been pre-planned from the demo we already learned of boom, jack, boom, boom. That's the pattern.
Yeah.
That's what goes on the verse. Chorus is separate. All the fills are separate. Any bridge sections, those are all separate. Okay, so we do that. So you start with the Dr. Beat, doing 4 clicks and then a downbeat on the 1. Okay, so when you hear, we're going to do the bass drum first. Okay, 1 beat. And so when you hear the 1, 2, 3, 4, hit, stop. So you hit the bass drum. So you got 1 note, okay, of the first downbeat of the measure. Okay, cool. Now what they would do, they would take the tape and turn the tape machine like this, and they would measure the beat to the Dr. Beat, how close it was. You had to get within 9 milliseconds. Sound travels a foot a millisecond. So you got to take in consideration foot hitting, blah, 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 the head, time, cord, microphone, blah, blah. So you had to be within 9 milliseconds. I think I got in within 4 or something. And it's not that you have a good time. It's actually, at the end of the day, it's actually by luck you're going to hit one of them. Really, it's true. It's nothing that you're not any more clever than anybody else. You're gonna whack one of them. You may just do it quicker. So okay, so you got the 1. So you got so that was good. We're gonna keep that. Okay. Now we're gonna go to the next part, which would be the snare on the 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, hit 2 beat.
Jeez.
Stop, measure. Bass drum pattern, boom, boom. You do that chord and the snare on the 4. Okay, then you create the 1 bar pattern. So you've got in the hi-hat you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 stop. So now you have that. So when you play it back, it's over and over, fucking over and over again. And what they did back then, they had microphone stands. They looped the tape around. There wasn't any such thing. They didn't have any Pro Tools and crap like that.
Sure, yeah.
You had to loop the tape.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
So it would go around like this, So, okay, so you got that part. Then you do and you go in chorus and you do the chorus part. Anytime there's a fill, they leave a hole. And you'd have to go in separately, and Barry would mark each drum, tom-tom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he'd give you a little chart, say 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, whatever, however you want you to hit it. So you did all that. And at the end of the day, I have a cassette of it. It's fantastic. I mean, they threw it all in the garbage. They wasted, I don't know, $500,000. I remember Kenny Loggins, some people would fly down from New York, just to see if Barry Gibb was like lost his fucking brain or something. What are you doing down here? We were like gone crazy down here. He's just smoking dope, No, man, that's cool, no. Because the other brothers didn't have anything to say. But Barry runs the show. I mean, Barry was the songwriter, a genius songwriter.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And so we ended up doing this thing. It was like, I don't know. I mean, but it's a perfect drum track. 2 of them I did. I mean, you listen to it, go, it's perfect. There's not, it doesn't.
But okay, so let me get this straight. So there is no click then that you were playing to. It was just 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you played. There was just the
yeah. You just hit the beat. You have to get close to the doctor beat, wherever the doctor beat hits on the one.
Yeah.
So click, 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 1. That's the bass drum. Downbeat the bass drum. Click, 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 bass drum. Hit. Measure. Now let's try it again. You're not quite close enough. Click. All right, one more time. Click, 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 click. Okay, got it. Then we go to the next beat.
Did they use this?
Beat. No, they threw it on the trash. I think they used some of it. I'm not sure, bits and pieces, but it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And we go each night. We'd all go back to the hotel and sit in the bar and sit there. I remember looking at Russ Kunklitz and I said, "They're fucking trying to kill us." I'm telling you, man, they're up to something. This is not cool. This is not normal. I mean, I think Vaquero left. I think he got pissed and said, "Fuck you, this is insane."
Yeah.
I remember saying, I think they're trying to kill us. And we were like raving alcoholics every night after the session. I mean, nuts. We drink ourselves silly.
Okay.
But what are they doing to us?
But the logic of this is kind of defies logic. Let's get the 4 best drummers who have the best time and not have them play time. All right.
Right, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, as I told you, they had a mechanical arm they'd made with a drumstick in it that they could trigger and it would hit the snare. They'd see how long a human would take, how long it would take to go bam and hit the snare when you're playing, a human's playing. It was just a waste of money.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was
interesting.
Huh? It was an interesting experience, just to see,
Wow.
I mean, as I say, I think they used some. I don't know what they. I mean, I just got out of there. I was like, "This is insane."
Did you ever play on any other Bee Gees tracks?
No. I don't know. I have a platinum record from Shadow Dancing. I don't know if it was presented to me. I don't think I'm credited. I think I may have played on it. But I don't know if I played drum or percussion. I did something on it with Andy Gibb.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You talked before about Mad Dogs and Okies. How did that develop? How did that come about?
I was just trying to think of something to do. Keep busy, No, I mean, I'm from Oklahoma, and I'm very proud to be from here, And I thought it'd be nice to have a little project and that has some, my friends on it and people that had some association with Oklahoma over the years. I'm proud of the players from here and my heritage. And so I, kind of got, like I told you earlier, just kind of came with an idea of, who could I call? And, it might be, and do songs that either written by Oklahoma artists or writers or performed by some of these people over the years, like Eric, and I started calling people up and they all said, cool, I'm in. So we had to pick songs and, Eric did one of Willis Allen Ramsey's songs, Positively, because he loved that song. And so I just sent him some stuff. And he said, I like that one. Let's do that.
Well, you're also in the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame, which that's an honor.
Yeah,
Any kind of Hall of Fame is an honor.
I guess, Yeah, I guess it's pretty cool. I mean, Merle Haggard's in there, a bunch of people in there. They're I look up to. It's a good honor.
Oh, it's very cool. Definitely. Last question for you. What's the best piece of business advice that either you received from somebody along the way or you just learned for yourself?
Business advice? Well, someone asked Steve Gadd that question one time about, you got any advice for me? Some little kid, he said, you never pet a burning dog. And the kid went, what? He said, oh, you meant advice about drums or just advice? You didn't say anything. You just said, you got any advice for me? Business wise, I mean, I've been blessed. I mean, Eric gave us points on records. I mean, I've been able to keep myself. I've kept my career underneath the radar, I guess, on purpose. Because I saw what this was early on, and saw how it ruined a lot of people. And that's why I chose not to be an out front artist, a person. I'd rather back people because I can always play with somebody else. If an artist's career goes down the toilet, they're done.
Yeah.
Basically,
yeah.
I mean, they're finished. I can go play with somebody else. Any of us can go play, and that's how I told you earlier. I'm writing my book still writing my book. About the best seat in the house is I had a good seat. I had a good view.
Yeah, right.
In front of me. I saw everything going. What was going on. But advice about business. I mean, there's something I've lived by my whole life, Bobby. When I was 17 years old, I went to breakfast with a fella here in town that I just met named J.J. Cale. And I went to breakfast with him after I played a little bar here because I was too young to get in, but I snuck in and played anyway. He knew I wanted to be, I was on my way to trying to get in this business, music, entertainment. So he sat there, we had some breakfast, and he ordered some pancakes. At that time, he used to wear his hat on backwards and had a little feather in it. Down by his chair, he had a paper sack with some whiskey in it. And he ordered some pancakes, and I was sitting there next to him, and he picked up a syrup jar, those jars with the little clip thing on them,
Yeah.
He poured some whiskey in that syrup jar. And he poured that whiskey and a syrup on his pancakes and took a bite. And he turned around and looked at me, and he goes, don't take this shit too seriously. That's the best piece of advice I can give anybody because it'll ruin you.
Yeah. That's excellent.
I've told people that many times. It's you take care of your business, yes, but don't start believing the shit you read and the shit because it'll be the end of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I've told people that before. I had a band called the Tractors. I told them those things that don't start believing that crap you're reading in the papers. You start reading it. And I said, don't believe you're Elvis, okay? But I'm not doing that now, and I'm involved here in Tulsa quite a bit with the OK Pop Museum being built here.
Yeah, yeah.
With the George Kaiser Foundation, and we managed to get the state to give us $80 million to build it. It'll house and archive a lot of the arts and culture of the state of Oklahoma. Whether it be not just music, but writers, photographers, painters, sculptors, blah blah blah. I've been very instrumental with that at the state capitol level in Oklahoma City with the governor and the Speaker of the House is a very good friend of mine. In fact, I'm doing the Speaker's Ball at the end of this month. It's a show they put on every year, which is a lot of the sponsors are the Kaiser Foundation and Chesapeake Oil, Oklahoma, and they're with the legislators and senators. They do it every year. It's a black tie thing. And they have entertainment. I did it last year with my good friend Ronnie Dunn, which I helped get his career going.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it together last year. I played drums with his band. And so this year I put together a show with, we're showcasing the great songs from Oklahoma, from Bob Wills up until now, through Vince Gill and Woody Guthrie and all that stuff. But the artists I'm using are all 16 new, young Oklahoma artists.
Oh, excellent.
Male and female both performing those songs.
Congratulations for keeping the dream alive for somebody, for those people, and also for keeping the Oklahoma tradition going.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to. I mean, I said my big focus is getting the museum done. I mean, I want to retire as business doing those kind of things. I don't want to tour anymore. I've done it. I've done all the things. I've done everything I set out to do when I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
I did all. I got my gold records. I got some money. Played in front of millions of people. I've traveled the world. Blah blah blah. I've eaten at great restaurants. Stayed at great hotels. I've done all those things. So now it's time to, teach other people and create an awareness of things, because that's no good leaving it with you. You got taking it with you. What's the deal? Go around and teach, or if I get my book done, if I ever do get my book done, go out and tour the book, and I want to have a little band of my own and have a multimedia presentation and talk about my career and the music that I've done and show videos and, at the same time talk about the book and, have people ask questions. I think people want to know. I don't know. There's still 88 million baby boomers left. There's still, even if 20 million die, we still got 68 left. I guess people want to know.
Jamie, thanks so much for your time today. This is great. A lot of fun. I enjoyed talking to you. To find out more about Jaime, go to JaimeOldaker.com. That's Jaime, Jaime Oldaker, Oldaker.com. It's all one word. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. Many thanks to Steve Cherubino. He's the host of the EDM Producer Podcast at EDMMR.com. Steve helps put the show together. Thank you very much, Steve. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, you can go to BobbyOwsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to BobbyOInnerCircle.com, or you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Mixcloud, and Google Play. At BobbyOwsinski.com and BobbyOInnerCircle.com, you'll find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.